I'm a yapper. How we doing, everybody? Welcome back to the Shaun Attwood channel. I am so excited to be here with Pastor Dave and Cheryl Bryan. Well, it's just Pastor Dave that's on the screen right now, but certainly so excited to be talking to Pastor Dave about his work and his mission and everything that he represents. Because when you boil it down, when you strip away buzzwords of faith and the things like this, it comes down to evil. And when you boil it down even further, it's the bullies of the world that think that the rules towards children, towards the vulnerable, whether it's your soul or your husk, they are there to prey upon it. And we ain't about that here on the Shaun Attwood channel. And those who know me know that I ain't about that. And we're here to learn about Pastor Dave's views and all of that. But before we get into that, Pastor Dave, thank you so much for being here. And before we talk about our first little thing, tell us a little bit about yourself. Introduce yourself, if you can, to us, please.
Sure. Yeah. Well, again, my name is Dave Bryan. I pastor the Church of Glad Tidings in Yuba City, California, Northern California. And I actually am a very unlikely person to be a Christian pastor. I'll tell you why I say that. I grew up on a ranch in Idaho. My dad was a good old boy, and he was not religious or pretentious. He had a deep faith in God. My mother is one of the most wonderful, virtuous human beings I've ever known. But in any event, what I grew up sorting at a very deep level is what I now call the great American religious enterprise. I saw what they said, what they said they believed, and then the way they acted, and I saw a huge gap in between. And so from an early age, I determined I'm going to try to close the gap between what I say I believe and the way I live. That has become really a life focus for me and a life journey. And the good news is I'm getting closer. But anyway, not knowing exactly what I'd do with my life, I never saw myself as a spiritual leader. I had no interest in doing that. And yet my older sister and my older brother, they went to a Bible college in Portland. And so I thought I'd go for a year just as I was trying to determine where to from here. 1 year led to 4 years. I graduated from Portland Bible College, and I graduated honestly more focused on closing the gap between what people say they believe and the way they act. And so I discovered during my years of Bible college, and I'm thankful for it, and I bear no ill will against anybody, but what I found out is there was a lot of religious BS, and there was a lot of what I call SMU stuff made up. It was just like, where did you come up with that? That is, somebody just made that up. I'll give you an example, bro. When I was enrolling, I came right out of Idaho. I had, even as a 18-year-old, I had a beard, and in my entrance interview, they said, "Well, we like everything about it. We think you'd make a good student here, but you'll have to shave your beard." I thought it was a joke, and I said, "I'm confused. Well, what did you say?" They said, "Well, you have to shave your beard," and I said, "I thought it was a Bible college, not a beauty college."
Right.
I said, "Well, what's up with that?" They said, "Well, we believe that it's a sign of rebellion to have your hair over your collar, your sideburns longer than the little duber. I don't know what you call that, but the little protrusion there on your ear, or your mustache below the corners of your mouth." And I said, "Okay, I'm confused." I said, I do know something about the Bible. I know that the men of the Bible considered it a great dishonor to have their hair cut or their beard shaved, to the point that David's mighty men, they sent a runner back to David to say, our enemies trapped us and they cut off our hair and our beards. What should we do? David's message back to the sergeants, the lieutenants of his army, is he said, definitely stay inside until your hair grows back out, because it would be a shame for anybody to see you like that. So, so again, for me, this is what happened to me. I wasn't going to sign up for the school. I thought that's ridiculous. Somebody just made that up. Probably someone who was not able to grow any facial hair, which I found out to be the case.
You know, it was 100% someone that couldn't grow facial hair. You know those guys, those patchy boys. Do you know what I'm saying? But it also felt like a passive way of creating conformity as well, like almost like as minimal of a you will be conform as you could sort of get.
Absolutely. So this is what happened to me. Again, my dad, he was a pastor for years, but he was not a traditional pastor. He was a good old boy that believed in God, believed in right and wrong. He was not somebody to be trifled with. He would tan my red rosy if I sassed him. But he was a gunsmith. He was a heavy equipment operator. He was a hot shoe farrier. He was a boxer, and he was a man's man.
Pastor Dave, I've just finished watching that show 1883 about the wagons going across America. Sounds like your dad. Sounds like your dad's the sort of guy that would have made it, right? Out of the 400 that left and the 8 arrived, your dad's there, just like
my dad would have made it.
Let's get to building, baby. You know what I'm saying? Wild.
Yeah, I do. So anyway, I decided I'm not going to be part of this Bible college because that's a ridiculous concept. And it has no bearing in reality anywhere except on the campus of that college. So I decided I wasn't going to be a part of it. I went home. My dad said, how'd your entrance interview go? And I said, oh, it went fine until they told me to shave my beard. And he said, well, what's up with that? I said, they said it was a symbol of rebellion. And I am thankful for this, bro. It was hard at the time, but my dad didn't miss a beat. He said, well, is it? And I said, don't go there with me, Dad. You know it's not a symbol of rebellion. And I had told the guy at the entrance interview, he said, we feel like it's a symbol of rebellion. I said, well, I'm from a ranch in Idaho. We feel like it's a symbol of being male.
Like you've seen the Shroud of Turin or whatever it's called, right? The fabric that was meant to have been laid.
Shroud of Turin, yeah.
Thank you. That is definitely a beard. And that's all I'm saying. I'm just saying.
Exactly.
Unless there was a COVID outbreak, right? And that's like one of them. That kind of looks like a beard to me. That's all I'm saying, Dave.
So that's right. So Dad said, well, is it a sign of rebellion? I said, Dad, you know it's not a sign of rebellion. He said, well, then shave it off and learn what you can learn out of that system and grow it back when you're done. And that was hard for me, to be honest. But I'm thankful for that. My dad did that several times in life where I would have expected him to, to take another route. And another time I had, there was an advanced science teacher that wanted me to run track. I couldn't run track, though I played basketball, but I couldn't run track because of the time of year. And so he was kind of chiding me. He had a bean up his nose. And anyway, one thing led to another. I said something in class that looking back was, a smart aleck comment, but it wasn't a big deal. I just made a comment about him misspelling a word on the board. And he said, okay, Bryan thinks he knows everything. So he said, our quiz tomorrow, it will be 2 off per question, except for Bryan, in which case it'll be 10 off. because he's Mr. Know-it-all. And I thought, you can't do that. So I thought I'd go home. And my dad was he was a no fuss, no muss guy. And so I thought he would just go down there and, grab my teacher by the short hair and say, hey, don't be doing that with my boy. But when I came home, he was working out in the barn. I went out to talk to him. And so when I told him that, he said, do you see a problem with that? And I said, yeah, I see a problem. It's not fair. And he said, you know what else is not fair, son? This world we live in is not fair. And so your job is not to try to defend fair. Your job is to try to flourish in an unfair world. And you're going to have to learn to go the extra mile. So he said, I'll tell you what, rather than do your chores tonight, me and your brother will handle that. I want you to go in and I want you to study that science chapter from top to bottom. And he said, here's the deal. If he took 50 off per question, it only impinges on your life if you miss one. So you go in there and study that chapter and get 100%. And then it doesn't really matter how much he takes off. And at the time, I felt like, wow, whatever happened to supporting your kid? And we all know that's unfair. And so anyway, but I went in, I studied the next day at class. I got 100% on the test. And it didn't really matter how much he took off because I didn't miss any. But those kind of lessons, I think, are really, really important life lessons. And so I ran into that again when my dad said, if your beard isn't a sign of rebellion, just shave your beard. You can grow back, in a few weeks, and learn what they have to teach. And he said, remember, eat the fruit, spit out the seeds. I love that about my dad, because almost everything, you would try to consume is, it's the wheat and the chaff all mixed together. You got to learn to sort things out.
Yeah, I'm with you. I hear you.
So anyway, that's how I grew up. And then it was just a strange, a fluke turn of events, which I see the hand of providence in. But in any event, even though I had no intention of being a spiritual leader, I was always good at sorting out big audacious hairballs. And so there was this church that I'm pastoring now in Northern California. And a guy that was a part of a group called Ministers Fellowship International asked me to come here and troubleshoot the church, see what was wrong. I didn't want to do it, but I finally consented. I said, okay, just this one last time, because I'd done it before. It was less than fulfilling to me, because let me just say this. Everything rises or falls on leadership. It doesn't matter if it's a country, a church, a school, a business. It doesn't matter. Everything rises or falls on leadership. And as the leaders go, so go the followers, right? So I already knew that it would be a leadership failure of some sort. But I went and met everybody, talked to everybody. The wildest thing happened that after I'd interviewed everybody about why this church, it had shrunk from over 200. It had shrunk down to about 75. They were having a hard time. And to me, it's always been clear. Things falter and fail when there's no clear vision of the good that people ought to do. I believe we're made in the image of our Creator. We're supposed to be productive. We're supposed to do good. We're supposed to solve problems. When we quit doing that, whatever else we're doing, well, we begin to flounder. And so I had my report ready to go, take back to the guy, Dick Iverson. He was the apostle over this Christian denomination. And anyway, the last guy that I interviewed, different people that I was talking to, I'd ask him, how long have you been here? Why'd you come? What did you like about the church? What do you think we need to change to move forward? And, I was taking notes. Obviously, that was my job. And many of them mentioned a man named Lou Benninger. And I said, oh, it was better when Lou was here. We miss Lou. Lou kept things straight. So anyway, this last interview that I had was with an elder of the church, and we went through everything that he had on his mind. And then I just asked him, I said, I'd like to ask you a question. Who's Lou Benninger? He said, oh, well, he was really the de facto leader of this group. Said he was a hippie. He was actually running a nudist colony in the foothills and selling cocaine.
Plot twist.
And he had an experience with God, changed his life. And he told everybody, if you want to stay here at well, it was a Timbuktu nudist colony.
Get your clothes back on.
Yeah. He said, if you want to stay here, put your pants on, quit having sex with everybody, and bring your drugs, put them on the table, because I've had a change of life, and it's my colony. So if you don't, I bear you no ill will. It's just this group is going to change. So it was about half and half. About half of them put their clothes on, brought their drugs. They wanted a life change. The other half, wandered, to parts unknown. And he was okay with both of those. Well, I didn't know, but that was the beginning. That was the root of this church, the church that's now called Glad Tidings. It started at that drug smoking hippie colony in the foothills. So anyway, now I'm talking to this elder, and I said, wow, I had no idea about that whole history. I said, why isn't he here? Oh, he got tired of the politics, which I have a big amen on that. Politics has no business in the structure of a church or anything else that's going to work well. But anyway, I don't mean by politics government or organization. I just mean the big ugly bureaucracy, that usually settles in. Yeah. But anyway, I said, well, he's obviously a strong leader. Why don't you call him and ask him to come back? And he said, oh, he's not coming back. He said, when he left, he stole $3 million from the church. So this guy that I was talking to was an elder, and he is also an attorney. And so I said, well, if he stole $3 million from the church, is he in jail? He says, oh, nobody wants to see Lou go to jail. He's a really nice guy. And I remember, I was 27 at the time. I remember saying, that may be the dumbest thing I've ever heard. It doesn't matter if you're a nice guy or a not so nice guy. If you break the law, if you do evil, if you steal $3 million, you got to pay the piper.
I agree. Steal $3 million, enter a country illegally. Accountability has to happen.
Exactly, bro. And so he said, well, nobody wants to see him go to jail. And he said, you'd have to know Lou Benninger to understand why we feel that way. So I asked for his phone number. I was done with my assignment. So I went to a local restaurant. I ordered a steak dinner. It was about 8:00 one night. And I had Lou Benninger's phone number, and I had the county sheriff's phone number right under it. And I called him. I said, hey, Lou, my name's Dave Bryan. He said, oh, yeah, I heard you came into town with your blue cape on trying to save the world. I said, no, not really. I was just asked to find what the problems were. And that's what I'm doing here. And he said, well, I don't want to talk to you. And I said, well, you probably need to reevaluate that. I said, I got your name listed here, and right under, I got the county sheriff's phone number. And he just went really quiet. He said, somebody told you about the money, huh? I said, yep. He said, well, it's none of your business. I said, well, I'm making it my business. They sent me down here to find out what happened to the church, and I found out you stole $3 million, and I'm making it my business. And he said, did they tell you where the $3 million came from? I said, no. He said, yeah, well, it came from me. And I said, you gave $3 million to that church. He said, yep. I said, where'd you get $3 million? He said, well, he said, when the hippie colony converted, we started 6 businesses, and we put all the profit from all those 6 businesses into a kitty, and we worked our butts off to take the message of the gospel of Christ to the world. And we saved $3 million. And then one thing led to another. We moved out of the foothills. We got this building. He said, I didn't want to really be involved in the government of things. And so I gave the money to the church, thinking that they would use it to help the poor and needy and meet urgent needs. And he said, they're not.
Yeah.
So
if you donate 3 million and then months later, it's still sitting there.
It's still sitting there.
You know, I'd probably feel the same. I'm not going to lie. Like, you would think that, you know, even when 3 million is a lot of money, and you would expect that for years and years, there's been business plans and proposals that don't have a budget yet.
Right.
That are just waiting, right? Just waiting. School in the Gambia, freaking school in wherever, whatever. You know what I'm saying, right?
Right.
Like that good work, you know.
Right.
Now,
so, you know, I felt the same way you do, Ron. I just, when he said that, I said, well, I know exactly how you feel. I said, frankly, I don't know how you figured out how to get the 3 million back, but that honestly sounds like something I might try to do.
Well, I'm not being funny. If a system was set up in place for people to donate to for charities or religious groups or whatever, that was set up for direct, that money has to be used through this system in a set amount of time, or it's refunded. Because if that money is just going to sit there, there's another group or organization who that money could quite happily be used for right now. I get mindset. It makes sense. It does make a lot of sense. It would annoy me a lot. I'm not going to lie.
Made a lot of sense. And so I said, well, I understand that. I said, however, you realize that in California, well-intentioned or not, when you steal $3 million from an entity, you can go to prison. And he looked me dead in the eye and he said, I realize that. He said, do you realize there are things worth going to prison for? And I thought, I love this guy.
Right.
How refreshing is that?
Yeah.
He knew that it was at the risk of going to prison. He thought it's still the right thing to do. And so I said, well, I got another question for you. Why don't you just go back and lead the church? And he said, I'd rather go back to smoking dope in the foothills than go back to those meetings. And
I'll tell you what, 3 million for Nudist Colony Part 2 ain't a bad starting fund, bro. I'm telling you, it's going to be a next level. You know what I'm saying? I feel you. Hell
so anyway, when he said that, and I believe in sovereign happenings because I've had a lot of them happen to me, frankly, Ron. But anyway, when he said that, I said, well, if I came and pastored the church, would you come help me? Now, I had no intentions of pastoring ever, but just the momentum of the conversation, I thought, this is as good a guy as I've ever met. And he and I think alike. And he said, well, I might. He said, if we did that, what would we do? And I said, well, I would study the life of Jesus Christ, not religion, not what religion says about him. I'd study the life of Jesus Christ, and I would try to do exactly what he did. And he said, you think it'll work? I said, well, I've kind of based my life on it working, but I've never really seen it working the way it should. But I said, I'll tell you what, if we did this together and it didn't work, I'll go smoke dope with you. And I'll never forget, you know, I was married and had 3 kids at the time. You know, my wife wasn't there. She'd have said, oh, no, you won't. But anyway, I was desperate. I just thought this guy is pure as the driven snow. He's no fuss, no muss, no BS in his system. And so if we tried to follow the teachings and the example of Jesus Christ, and that did not work out, I'd be looking for a new door to walk through. And so when I said that, I remember he said, "Have you ever smoked dope?" I said, "No." He said, "You need to know something. I've smoked everything a human being can smoke. And if we make this deal, I will hold you to those conditions."
Hell off.
And I said, "Well, Mr. Manager, we don't know each other well, but
Yeah.
I want you to know that you will not have to hold me to those conditions. If we make this deal and Christianity, as written in the Bible, does not work, I'll go smoke dope on my own accord." And so he stuck his hand out and we shook hands. And he said, "What now?" I said, "Well, now I'm moving to Melbourne, Australia, and you can go back to doing whatever you were doing before I called you." And I remember him saying, "So this whole conversation was BS?"
Wow.
And I said, "No, it was sincere. I asked you if I came down here, would you help me?" We talked about the details of that, but I said, "No one has invited me to come down here. I'm not about to try to do a hostile takeover on a local church."
Right.
And I said, "It would have to be the sovereign hand of the Almighty that made this work out." And I remember he just shook his head. He collected his stuff, shook his head, said, "This is ridiculous." And he picked up his stuff and walked out of the restaurant. I thought, yeah, that was kind of a ridiculous conversation. But anyway, I took my, the next morning I flew back to Portland. I took the overview that I had made of the church and put it on this apostle's desk. And he said, "Well, David, what do you think?" I said, "Dick, I think what I always think. It's a leadership failure. There's good people. They're character people. They just are out of their niche. They don't have any forward momentum in casting vision, and so everybody's confused, and confused people, what people are not up on, they're down on, and so it's just falling to hell in a handbasket."
Yeah.
And he said, "Well, why don't you go pastor the church?" And I said, "Because A, I don't want to ever pastor, and two, no one has invited me to." He said, "Well, oddly enough, just before you walked in, I got a call from down there, and they asked me to ask you if you'd consider come pastoring the church." So at that point, I thought that this is what I call the hand of God. This is divine intervention. I'd never pastored before, wasn't interested in it. But what I was interested in is trying to do authentic Christianity the way Jesus Christ modeled it. I was interested in that.
Okay.
And I found a guy that was also interested in it and was radical. And Jesus Christ was radical. So
Can I ask you a question?
Yeah.
Pastor Dave, right?
Yeah.
So I'm fairly uneducated on a lot of the details of what makes a pastor a pastor. What makes it? Is it different from a vicar? Is it different? What is the title? How does it come about? What does it mean? Can you just educate me a little bit on what it is to be a pastor, if you could?
Yeah, I could. So let's start with what was supposed to mean in the Bible.
Okay.
The word, our word for pastor, comes from the Greek word shepherd.
That's okay.
And so that means someone who essentially guides, feeds, protects the flock, right?
Yeah.
Now, what it's come to mean is just a title that you are awarded by graduating from some theological system.
Okay.
Which means that and different systems of Christianity or any other a similar religion, there are different niches, just as there is when you go to college. You might get a bachelor's, you might get a master's,
okay, I'm with you.
might get a doctorate. And so the words mean different things to different people, but essentially there are three positions of authority that are talked about in the New Testament. And one is pastor. That means to lead, to guide, to feed. And one of them is bishop, which means to exercise authority over. But remember, from the biblical terms, authority is always for the benefit of those under you. It's never for your benefit, right?
So when we're looking at the variations of Christianity, the
Right.
pastor or whatever that title would be is the one that is directly under the bishop. To sort of break it down, right? Okay, that makes sense to me, right? That does. So it's almost like we've got the massive organized churches that have their titles, and this feels more like small town, sort of religious people who want to shape things in their own kind of way, going off topic a little bit. Is that sort of what it is?
And so then there's one other title that you might be familiar with, and that's elder. We think of that in terms of age, but the teaching of the New Testament is that it has nothing to do with age. It has to do with maturity. We both know you can be very mature and be young, and you can be an absolute idiot and be old. So it has nothing to do with age. It has to do with maturity. And so generally, like here, I have 40 people that help me pastor.
Okay.
And they would all be considered mature believers, right?
Okay.
And so, and of course, there's some real benefit there in terms of in the multitude of counsel, there's safety and wisdom and strength, according to the scriptural teaching. So
it kind of sounds like if we look at the police and organized religion is the same thing. I feel like pastor's like a sheriff. So that sort of, if we were comparing it to a police force, I know, sorry, it's the autism. My analogies are ridiculous. But when you said, you've chosen your elders, and it's interesting you use the word elder, because that is we understand when you say that, right? It doesn't need to be a religious thing or anything like that. People can relate to that term. But I almost feel like that's been phased out of organized faith, because it sounds very tribally, and we can't be getting too close to that, tribal witchcrafty old school stuff, you know what I'm saying, in the modern faiths, you know what I'm saying? So
well, let me one up that, bro. I think the whole organized system is being phased out. I honestly do. I think that what Christ began 2,000 years ago has been bastardized almost into oblivion.
Yeah.
And that right now what we're seeing is we're seeing the destruction of that system that was never organized by God. It's just the construct of man. And so there's a verse in scripture that says everything that can be shaken must be shaken, so that only that which cannot be shaken will remain. And so, there are spiritual truths. It doesn't matter how you dress them up. They're rock solid. They're spiritual truths. And those things will remain. And what won't remain is all the bells and smells and incense and nonsense that people made up. That's in what I call the SMU column, right? Stuff made up. Like, you need to shave your beard. You need to do this. You need to dress this way. You need to, it's all those things.
Do you not feel that you're up against so for example, I feel like when it comes to the big money hungry Christian machine, or the Catholic machine, shall we say, right? Yeah. There is a percentage of people who are vulnerable and lost, who get absorbed into brands, shall we say, and churches, because they're truly vulnerable to finding something to feel acceptance in, right? Yes. Whereas when it comes to the individuals that I know and people like yourself, it's not about the organized religion. It's about truly trying to go on a spiritual journey of personal discovery rather than a collective acceptance, if that makes sense.
And totally makes sense, bro. 100%.
You've got to understand, it was only about a year ago I discovered the whole millions of people that it's about the individual Jesus. It's not about the religions that he's a spokesperson for, allegedly. And that blew my mind. It blew my mind, because my whole spiritual journey has been wild. And it really made sense because of the individual, the man that walked. And the gods I follow were known to come down to earth in the shape of man and walk amongst us and things like this. And for me, I'm finding myself fascinated by certain religious figures that were real. You know, there were you could go up and prod them, right?
Yeah.
And it's incredible when you start talking to people who have denounced the mainstream and follow just a deity, right? Regardless of who it is, how much more in line with what your impression of the deity is than the actions of the massive corporations that seem to project a falsehood, if you will.
Right, right. So exactly true, my friend. But what we see is that the model that Christ gave us was just what you have been unpacking there, Ron.
Yep.
It was a personal relationship with God. And let me tell you a story, if I can, real quick. We have a drug rehab here, and we had a young guy come out of county. He's 6'5", big, handsome, strong young man, but he was addicted and had got himself in trouble with drugs. So we were doing an entrance interview with him, and he said, "Well, I'd really like to stay here, but before I give you a yes or no, you have to talk to my dad." I said, "No problem. Give him a call, have him come in." He said, "All right, don't be intimidated." And I said, this kid was, 6'5". I said, "Well, I don't intimidate easy, my friend, but what does that supposed to mean?" And he said, "Well, he's been the head of the San Francisco chapter of the Hells Angels since Sonny Barger, and a lot of people feel intimidated by him." I said, "Oh, well, I'm anxious to meet him." So anyway, a couple of days later, here came this big old boy. He's got a scar on both cheeks where a 45 bullet went right through his face. And I saw it coming out. I said, "Looks to me like you had a close-up encounter with the 45. He says, "Yep." He said, "Point blank, went right through my head." He said, "I only lost 4 teeth."
Do you know how badass you have to be to get shot in the face with a 45 and only lose 4 teeth and be standing there talking about it? Like the guy that pulled that trigger, I swear, because obviously, right? Like I don't know what happened after he pulled the trigger, but in the Netflix version of that, he's got no more bullets left, right? That rat clicks back, and that guy is just stood there like, "Yeah, is that right? Is that right, boy?" Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Damn.
Yeah. So this big old boy, he had that scar through his face, but he also was missing his leg from the knee down on the right side.
Yeah, and I bet that was from like a spot that he picked and got an infection. Leg falls off because of something nothing. Shot in the face, no problem. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That's how the world works.
I think it was from a motorcycle accident. But anyway, he's peg leg, and he's coming at me all 6'5",
peg leg
across the parking lot. And I don't know how many gangbangers you work with, but they all have some kind of a deadly weapon that the police can't really say that's a deadly weapon because they have a reason. So he had
on a bike and also have a 16-inch spanner in the satchel. Who's to say that's not for taking some bolts off, right?
Right. So this guy had he had a metal cane, and it had a big skull on the top of it, and he had 2 fingers in each of the skull's eyes.
Yep,
but he could take your head clean off with that thing. And so he'd come walking over to me, and he's towering over me, 6'5". He looks down at me, and he says, "Let's get something straight right off the bat." And I'm looking up at him like this. I said, "What's that?" He says, "I think all religion is a crock of shit. You got that?" and I said, "Well, at least we agree on that. Is there anything else you want to talk about?" And when I said that, he stepped back. He said, "What?" I said, "At least we agree on that. Is there anything else we need to talk about?" And he said, "Oh, I thought you were the pastor." I said, "I am the pastor." He said, "Oh, now I'm totally confused." I said, "Well, don't feel bad. I think most of the world is totally confused." I said, "Do you realize that the religious leaders of the day crucified Jesus Christ for his teaching and his lifestyle?" And he said, "They did." I said, "Yep." He said, "Well, I'll be damned." I said, "Well, not if I can help it." And right then, something clicked, and he laughed, and he said, "Well, I think you and I are going to get along just fine." And I still have his phone number, and he stops by every once in a while, and I consider him a friend. But here's the deal: most religious operations that I know of would have been afraid of that man, would not want him to be on the property because of his association, and would never have given him a chance to be a real human being and to hear to hear an untarnished version of the gospel, and that's that we're created in the image and likeness of God, and he's a God of power, yeah, but a God of love. And it's not about a encoded system of rules and regulations. Did you know? You might know this, you might not, but just for your listeners,
Sure.
God himself wrote out 10 laws. We call them the 10 commandments of the
Okay.
Old Testament. 10 laws. And about half of them to govern our relationship with one another, and the rest to govern our relationship with God. And then when Christ came, the religious order of the day, which were Jews, they were Pharisees and Sadducees, but the religion of the day had added 613 commandments. A commandment for everything. You got to wear this. You can't take more than this many steps. You can't eat this with that. On and on and on and on. And when Christ came, he said, you've heard the prophets and the sages talk about the commandments of God. But I tell you that if you will love God with all your heart, soul, mind, and strength, and love your neighbor as much as you love yourself, you will fulfill the entire law of God. So, what men made into 613 extra commandments,
Yeah.
Christ reduced to 4 words: love God, love others. Bam. That's it. He said, if you'll do that, you'll please the Creator. And it's not just the Jews, bro. Every religious system in the world tries to make up all kinds of rules to govern people's lives.
Listen,
It's all about conformity.
100%, and that includes the ones who hijack the individuals that you follow yourself. There's none of them that can escape from the greed and the human condition. There's very little that can escape. If you were handed a recipe for a pie and it was your whole business, 20 years later, how different is that recipe based off saving money and scrimping and greed and allowing the product to diminish for a buck and control? I'm telling you, man. Why am I comparing this to pies? But listen, I just want to say to everybody at this point, thank you for being here. Can you make sure you like and you share? Ron, really a third person, right? I like to really talk to my guests, because when we're talking about evil, Satanism, the horrific groups around the world that think children and the vulnerable are there for some sort of ritualistic purpose, I want you guys to understand that everything you've just heard on the spiritual battling plane is the CV, right? Is the work history, is the credentials of the individual on this path. And I love it's so weird, right? And before we go on to the satanic stuff and all the evil stuff, because I really want to go into that quite deeply. Before we started this, we were talking just a little bit about what happened to Charlie Kirk. And I wanted to give yourself an opportunity just to mention that. And the reason for that is he was an individual who spoke about the same. individual, Jesus, in the same way you
Yep.
do.
Yep.
I've got a very dear friend, John Wedger. He's ex-British police. He exposed all of the child hurting judges and police. The government tried to unalive him, and he is
Yeah.
effectively a badass. Okay,
Yeah.
and he was one of the first people that showed me the difference between organized religious followers and those who are like, this is absolute nonsense. And then you'll
Yeah.
hear about these people who then end up in a church, right? But then you're like, isn't the church the organized thing? Well, it's not. They're singling out individuals that represent the path that they're on, and purity in because you could strip back, right, the whole story of Jesus and reframe it without the spirituality, and the story is basically the same. The words spoken are the same. And I think with the modern world, there's such a pre-instilled rejection of anything we've been told, okay? Because we've got the internet now, and you know, if I'm 17 years old, I'm probably going to listen to that. And but then we start seeing young people connecting with someone like Charlie because of the way that he directs people off of the teachings of an individual rather than the waving of a book, right? And all of the mighty, he will strike you down. All of this stuff, right? Great to watch, I might add, right? If I'm passing it in the street, I'm like, oh, do you know what I'm saying? You know, his granddad was one of those like auction people that were like $2,000, $3,000. You know what I'm saying? Some people are just born to rant. Charlie did it in a different way. And
oh boy,
I just wanted to give you a chance to mention it. I'll bring up a picture of him here.
Yeah, well, I just want to thank you, first of all, for that. But I have the very highest respect of Charlie Kirk. Actually, I met him. I've followed him for a long time and always respected him, but was able to meet him about 6 months ago. And I told him, I said, Charlie, we pray for you. We are thankful for your influence in the world. And I'd love for you to come and speak at the Church of Glad Tidings in the Embassy of Heaven. He said, I'd like to do that. He said, my schedule's pretty full, but we'll look for a time. But I have the very highest regard for Charlie. One of the things that I have a picture of him on my phone. I just posted it on Truth Social today. But he said that that when he died, he hoped he would be remembered as a man of courage and of faith. And I will say, I think Charlie Kirk is one of the best examples of courage and faith that I know of, certainly in our present age, but maybe ever. I don't know who you would compare to Charlie Kirk for courage and faith. And I have the very, very highest regard for him. To me, you know, there's the words of Christ where he talks about us living our lives in a way that someday that we will hear, well done, you were a good and a faithful servant. And I think of Charlie, who could we say better earn that commendation from the Almighty than Charlie Kirk? I have the very highest respect for him, and it was an egregious evil that took his life. And honestly, it made me sick to my stomach, which doesn't happen often, but it literally made me sick to my stomach when I heard that. I canceled my appointments, and I went to spend some time in prayer and meditation, and just try to sort through what had just happened. But I have the very, very highest regard for Charlie Kirk. And I know that no man technically is perfect, but Charlie was pretty darn close in my book.
I think when you say no human's perfect, but he's pretty damn close, I think what he projected is the way that we all wish we could represent ourselves, not
Absolutely.
only in conflict, but in our belief in what we stand for. Do you know how many people stand for nothing?
Exactly.
Nothing at all. Pastor
Exactly.
Dave.
Yeah.
And this is another thing. When I heard about Charlie Kirk's passing, it was Shane that told me, and I was like, "Oh, who's Charlie Kirk? I need to go and Google him." And as soon as I see the face, I'm like, "Oh my god!" And I
Yeah.
know Charlie Kirk from the man sitting on the table in the park with "Change My Mind," and it might be "There's only two genders," whatever. But there
Yeah.
was no political or religious insignia. It was just words in front of a table.
Right.
So it
Right.
was accessible. It's like subconsciously accessible to me. So then I was like, "Oh, this guy knows his stuff. He's quite funny, right?" And then the
Yeah.
years go by, and the years go by, and you see him doing the same thing, but now it's 1,000 people, it's
Right.
2,000 people, it's 3,000
Yeah.
people,
Yeah.
and then you start realizing, oh, that was the guy that was on that thing with Trump, and you start
Yeah.
piecing it all together. And
Right.
I knew him as the really well-spoken dude from YouTube. Do you see what I mean? And when you
Yeah.
learn the bigger story, and then you
Yeah.
start seeing thousands of more clips because they're all being flooded on the internet, and
Yes,
you
they are.
realize the etiquette and the respect that this man had for
Oh, yeah.
people that would scream in his face, that they would say horrendous things to him. And his quote that stuck out in my mind, Pastor Dave, is, "The minute we all stop talking, violence begins."
Yeah.
And that is the thing, that is the Charlie Kirk legacy that's burned into
Right.
my mind.
Right.
But I'll tell you something else, Pastor Dave. I should not be having the emotional reaction to a man that I've never met, only learned about his political and like his real stance on the faith that he had over the last couple of days. Why am I so drawn in and affected by this? And when you have a man that so represents the essence of a higher power, could we
Yeah.
not say that that is the evidence of the love that the deity you speak of wants us all
Yeah.
to feel?
Yeah.
And that is
Absolutely.
fascinating me, man.
Love.
Like, that was a moment where I was like, whoa, that is crazy, right?
Yeah.
It's not one of those, and I don't want anyone to worry. Ron, we're not converting. Ron is just talking a lot about the individual Jesus. Don't
Yeah.
ever think Ron's talking about the global facilitation of abuse of younglings around the world that's systematically ignored by what can only be regarded as the upper management for these
Yeah.
false collections of misrepresentation. And we're
Oh
going to
my.
get to that. We're going to get to that, Pastor Dave. But I just wanted to give us a chance just to let you touch on Charlie and
Yeah.
for
I'm
us to
glad you
remain.
did. Thank you, Ron. I'm glad you did.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, let's do away with the niceties of the path of Pastor Dave, and the fun stuff is coming to a closure now, because everyone that's watching here, we know about the real realities of the ritualistic abuse of satanic for evil, for the demonic, right? And the scariness is there's still a denial in its existence. And would you tell us a little bit about your work with regards to the realities of the horrific abuse, the organizations, the individuals that you have encountered that are the opposition of
Yeah.
love and
Yeah.
the path you're on?
Yeah. Sure will.
Oh,
And let me just do a very brief segue into that. I told you about how I came down here, and let me just say, when I did, I didn't want to inherit a religious system, so we let everybody go. We started over fresh, and we did a 3-day fast, and really nothing much happened the first 2 days. The third day, I woke up with a verse from the Bible in my mind. It was very clear. And I got up, looked it up, and I told the guys, I think this is our marching orders. Because remember, I told Lou, let's try to do what Jesus did. Just honestly try to do what he did. Not add anything, not take anything away. And so the verse simply said, Jesus Christ went about doing good and helping those who are oppressed by the evil one. And I just thought, there you go. That's what he did. That's what we should try to do. So Lou and we asked a couple other guys that were from the group there to join us, and I said, "This is our marching orders. Let's come up with a statement of how to do this, and then we'll just focus on that the rest of our life." And so we wrote on the wall, "Find a need and meet it. Find a hurt and heal it." Still on the wall today. If you come here in big letters, it says, "Find a need and meet it. Find a hurt and heal it."
I just want to circle back and just want to remind everyone of what Pastor Dave just said there, and circle back to what I said about spelling, okay, and what it actually means. All right, it's wonderful that you picked up on something that you thought made a real in the physical world by writing it and spelling it, and that has been the dedicated road that you've been on. You know.
Yep, absolutely. It's huge. And so we embrace that. And frankly, at the time, I remember Lou saying, what exactly does it mean? Help those, deliver those that are under the oppression of the evil one. I said, well, I know generally what that means, but I'm not sure exactly about all the ins and outs of that. But I said, I think that if we will really focus on doing good, then God will teach us, the Spirit will lead us as we go. And so, we joined hands in a group, and we just made a commitment to God and to one another. We're going to do good. We're going to help people. And if God wants us to be integrally involved in healing those who are oppressed of the devil, he'll have to teach us how to do that, because none of us really knew exactly. I mean, in general, you can think, well, maybe we can help drug addicts get off drugs and whatnot. But anyway, that's the commitment that we made. But at that time, I didn't have experience with really malevolent, dark forces that, of course, today I've done exorcisms all over the world. But back then I was a young man, and I just thought, I know there's evil. Anyone with a thinking mind knows there's evil, and I'm not sure exactly how to fight it, except, trying to do good. But anyway, that's the bridge I needed to make, because we started doing good. The church was just 70 people. I became the fire department chaplain. Lou became the police department chaplain. Another guy in the church became the sheriff department chaplain. And between the three of us, we knew every heartbreak that happened in both counties. There's nothing that happened that we didn't know about, virtually. And so that's how we built a church of over 1,500. Is we would just when we met together, I'd say, well, remember, our marching orders is find a need and meet them, find a hurt and heal them. And so let's talk about what we found this week. And so there's a lady that her husband overdosed, and she has 3 kids, and we need to help her. So how can we do that? Just took ideas. People say, I can help. We'll get groceries, blah, blah, blah. Go visit her. Or maybe somebody's house burnt down. And so we'd make a list of things that they needed. That's how the group began to grow, and it doubled and doubled. And pretty soon we had over 1,500 people, just because we were taking care of human needs. And amazing thing that happened, Ron, I right at the beginning of that, I sat down and wrote a letter, and we sent it to every agency head in Yuba County and in Sutter County. Those are the 2 counties that our church draws from. I sent it to every agency head, and I said, we're followers of the man Jesus Christ, who went about doing good, and we want to do that. We want to represent him well. So if there are any needs in this county that you know about, we will try to help. And I said, we're a small group and we're not wealthy, but our motto is, if we can, we will. So just if you have a need, just ask us, and if we can meet it, we will. And we started doing all kinds of things. One of the first things we started is we called it the Great Graffiti Paint Out, but there were all kinds of gang signs, and then of course the gangs would fight. Somebody would mark their territory, blah blah blah. It
Yep.
was causing all kinds of problems, and so we just determined. Anybody knows how to paint over a graffiti sign, right? We
Yeah.
just determined if the police department will call in as soon as they notice it, we'll have it painted over in 24 hours. And so we started the Great Graffiti Paint Out. Still going on today, by the way.
Wow.
But what happened is the gangs quit marking territory, because what's the point? It's going to be gone in 24 hours or less. A lot of times
just in case anyone's listening to this and they're thinking, well, that's small fries. If you have a look at the site, like the research that's been done on what happens when one empty building has one smashed window, the progression of the outward decay and social standard depletion just from that is fascinating. And it's the same with graffiti and litter and all these kind of things. And it's those tiny, tiny little things that most people won't notice, right? They'll take it for granted, but it's a very well-established way of making some good impact. It really is. From the human condition point of view, from community point of view, from all of it. And it's a fascinating set of statistics. It really is.
Yeah, it is. It's the laws of thermodynamics. All things left to themselves continually degenerate. They never get better and better. They get worse and worse. And so just by virtue, you paint out the signage, that sends the message that this has not been left to itself. Somebody is responsible for it. Yep. And so we started that. We started reaching out to single moms. We started. I remember one time the director of human services said, "Could your church possibly try to help single moms with mechanical problems, because they don't know what they're doing? They go in, they actually just need an oil change, and some unscrupulous mechanic charges them $400, and they don't know, that they are just vulnerable." And so I remember one day, this was really at the beginning, I said, we got this request from Edmund Smith. Is there anybody here that is a professional mechanic? And this guy puts his hands up. He says, I got a mechanic shop. I didn't know that. And so I said, oh, well, what's your thoughts about this? He says, well, it's a big job trying to take care of all the single moms in 2 counties. But he said, I'll tell you what I will commit to. I'll open my shop and I'll do as much as I can every other Saturday from 7 to 5. Nice. And I said, that's awesome, Mike. And some other guy stood up and he said, hey, we haven't met, but I'm a mechanic. I just don't have my shop. But he said, I would be willing to do the other 2 Saturdays every month if I could use your shop.
Do you know how unintimidating 2 days a month is for you to start doing something like whatever it is that story applies to in your world, right?
Right. Yeah.
2 days a month. I mean, it sounds achievable. As I think we've all got that in us. Do you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely.
It's an interesting thought, man. It's an interesting way of.
We did a lot of things that way, bro, and so we started auto docs, and we helped hundreds of single moms, and then we got from fixing up their cars to, we had some car dealers that started shopping for great values on vehicles, and that come and say, hey, we got a great opportunity to buy this car for $1,000, and would pitch in. And so we began to buy inexpensive vehicles for the moms that had no vehicle at all. And anyway, my point is we did scores of things like that. We did a teen runaway hotline, and we started a trauma intervention program. Every time there's a 911 call, we would send somebody out, not to get in somebody's face about religion, just somebody to say, hey, you're not alone. We love you. We care about what you're going through. And if you need to talk to anybody, if you need any practical help, just give us a call. And we called that trauma intervention program. We responded to every 24/7. We responded to every 911 call in Yuba and Sutter County. So anyway, that's how we got started. But to move up to our involvement in spiritual warfare and the ministry that
just before you do, and I'm sorry, everyone was like, yes, we're getting to it. But just 1 second, because every time I see something that, if I was to apply what you just said to my interpretation of modern mega religions, right?
Yeah.
All I ever see them is gathering people together to raise to get money, right? I never see them, because what you just said, that seems like the easiest national program for the church to ever roll out. The 2-day-a-month campaign, guys, come on, release a church app that where everyone does their 2 days. They can log in together so that they can be like, yeah, look at, we're around the world. I'm in Australia doing my day, you're in freaking Scotland doing your day, and we're on an app so that we feel, and then at the end we get a little something from the app because we're that stupid now that we need our phones involved. But that's okay, it's okay. But they don't. And then we have a group of normal people getting together and going, right, this impossible situation that governments with billions haven't figured out yet. Let's have a tiny bash. Let's give it a bash, right?
Yeah.
And results happen, right? And even if those results happen on your street, then your postcode, then your city, then your state, your whatever, it's incredible when you actually do the work, okay?
Yeah, absolutely.
When you're getting your hands dirty, when you're making the change, and that is the way it should be. That is the way it should be.
Come on, brother.
Yeah, like it's mad, man. Honestly, the organized mega religions is just crazy. Now
they have lost the main point. The main point, if you call yourself a Christian, that actually means like Christ. That's what the word means. Now, the lifestyle may be radically different, but the word means like Christ. The Bible says that they were first called like Christ at Antioch because they were doing the stuff. They, like Christ, he went around doing good and helping those that are oppressed of the devil. They were doing that at Antioch. And so they called them the Christ ones, the ones that are like Christ. They're doing the same stuff. Now, it's my contention, Ron, that organized Christianity, particularly hypocrisy is just a human condition. It always has to be guarded against. But particularly since the days of Roman Emperor Constantine, who started the unholy Roman Catholic Church. That's called the Holy See, but it's not holy at all. Now, there are good people involved in it. I'm not trying to castigate everybody that's in that system, because I've found that there are good people in almost every system that are trying to do the right thing and be honorable in their life. But I think that organized Christianity has predominantly misrepresented Christ rather than represented Christ, because the English word represent, it's actually represent. It means to present again in the same manner. That's how you represent something. You do it again the same way. Well, when you look at the great American religious enterprise, the religious game show that goes on throughout much of the world, led by America, sadly, but through much of the world, there is virtually nothing that represents the man Christ Jesus. It represents all kinds of other things, greed and fame and all kinds of stuff. But the average, here's one for you, bro. When the COVID con rolled out, and it was a well-planned hoax that had to do with population reduction. But when that rolled out, in America, they made an assessment, a governmental assessment, that the churches were what was the word they used? It was like they were non-vital. It was a different word.
Non-essential.
Non-essential. Thank you, my friend. And I remember a county supervisor calling me and saying, you're going to have to shut your church down. I said, actually, no, we're not going to. He said, you have to.
Actually,
yeah.
No.
I said, no. I said, no, we don't have to. It's a First Amendment right. Even if it wasn't, the amendments of the U.S. Constitution are just statements of our God-given rights as human beings made in his likeness and image. That's all they are. And so I just said, as divine creations, we don't have to not meet together. Oh, you've been declared non-essential. And I said, who got the vote on that? He said, well, the government said. I said, well, tell the governor we've declared him non-essential. We could live fine without Governor Gavin Newsom, whose office is only 45 minutes from my office, But he said, oh, you want me to tell the governor that? I said, well, I'd like to tell him myself, but I don't have his phone number. So just you can tell him that for Dave and Cheryl at the Church of Glad Tidings, we have declared him non-essential. And we're going to go about our life. He can lock down, mask, double mask, take shots, take boosters every morning. We don't really care what he does, but we're not going to participate.
Right.
And we didn't. And they ranted and raved, and he sent me a cease and desist order signed by him, which, just gave me something to throw away. But we never did participate with that because it was a violation of our God-given right to be sovereign beings, right?
Yeah, no, I'm with you. I'm one of the few people you'll meet in your life who transitioned into lockdown without literally nothing changed in my life. I was a full-time live streamer, right? And a bit of a hermit. Okay. All of my food came delivered because I'm not going to go outside because I'm a hermit. And it was so bizarre. And then, because I never even really thought about, the single people who are maybe 25, moved out their parents' house for the first time, who live alone and who are like, okay, I'm going to listen and I'm going to stay inside for like 2 years, right? Do you know what I mean? I had a great time.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? But well, I get what you're saying, because staying indoors was the only thing that I listened to, as far as, cures, shall we say, that was never happening. You're talking to a guy. The government had to send a legal representative to my house to tell me that if I didn't register the birth of one of my children, they were going to legally do it for me, because I was like, listen, I know she's here. I don't need a certificate. I can see her. She's there. You know what I mean? But it turns out what will happen when you press the government in that way, they will just come to your house, take your child away, and register it for you. So
it's pretty ugly, really.
Yeah, it's fun. It's fun.
I have a court date here in about 10 days for doing a wedding without the consent of the government. And I thought, for heaven's sakes, people have been being married for thousands of years without they don't care about the government. They care about, the man or woman that they want to live with the rest of their life and raise a family with. But anyway, I don't mind doing that. I don't mind reminding the government that they serve at the will of the people. We're a ways off track, quite a ways off track in America, but that still is the design of the American Constitution Bill of Rights, is that the greater magistrates serve at the will of the people. And with God's help, we're going to get it back there. But anyway, Yeah. So,
Yeah, let's circle to the core of this, which is the spiritual battle, the evilness, and that's that part of your life. Because
yeah. So,
yeah,
here's what happened to us. We were already busy meeting urgent needs. Well, we got further and further down the rabbit hole, right? We were helping drug addicts. We were helping prostitutes. We were helping, teen runaways and all kinds of people. We started getting into supernatural things. So we had some incidents with kids in juvenile hall that were under the control of dark spirits, and one of them died that way, and it was really sobering to me. And so I remember going into juvenile hall, and there was a young lady that was in a plexiglass cage, and not in general population. She was in a 10 by 10 by 10 cage. And I said, well, why is she in the cage? Oh, she's got some behavioral problems. And it's a little 14-year-old girl. And they said, would you like to talk to her? I said, sure. And they all started laughing. I should have recognized that there was foul play afoot. But anyway, they started laughing. They asked their commanding officer if they could put me in the cage. And he said, yeah, but keep a close eye on him so nothing goes wrong. I thought, what in the heck? It's a 14-year-old girl. So anyway, I got it and sat down with a little table. My face was probably 20 inches from hers. And I was just trying to be kind. I was much older than her. And I said, hello, sweetheart. And a different voice, not a 14-year-old girl's voice, but a different voice says, I'm not your sweetheart. And honestly, Ron, I didn't know diddly squat about dark spirits at the time. I'd read about them in the Bible, but man, I was from a ranch in Idaho, right?
yeah, man.
And there was nothing funky.
We always talk about our positive spiritual enlightenment moment. All right, put me on the path of this and that. Most people block out and rationalize moments like that, where they're like, they would leave 10 minutes later, what they believe what just happened slightly changes, so they can be like, oh, she must have a sore throat or something, and they will block it out because we can't understand it. It's a lot easier to put faith in something you can't hold on to when it's all positive and rainbows and sunshine, right? But when we're asking you to understand the other side of the coin, right? People don't want to hear it. They block it out.
I get it, bro.
Let's go. So once that lovely lady had spoken to you, and I imagine you were like,
a voice growled at me, I'm not your sweetheart. I thought to myself, geez Louise, man, you need to do something for your throat. But I was just, how all of your senses, your brain's daisy wheeling, right? Like, what the heck is going on with this little girl? And so I said, well, why are you in juvenile hall? She said, I tried to beat my mother to death with a baseball bat. And I honestly wasn't expecting that from this little girl. And it just slapped me upside the head. I thought, what the heck? And so I said, oh, I am so sorry. She said, why? And I said, well, why did you hate your mother? And she said, I never said I hated her. And I said, well, you tried to beat her to death with a bat? Why would you do that? And she said, because she had powers that I wanted. And at the time, I've gone all over the world now and taught about it all over. But at the time, I did not have any idea what she was talking about. And I said, well, what do you mean your mother had powers? She said, she has dark powers. We're in a coven together. She wants out of the coven. I don't want out of the coven. I want her powers. And she said, so I did it. And she was talking like you and I would talk about a ball game or something,
Right.
He said, so I did a Judas ritual to get her powers. Well, I said, well, what's a Judas ritual? She said, I thought you were a pastor. I said, well, I am. She said, you don't know what a Judas ritual is? And I said, I know Judas betrayed Christ. She said, yeah, that's where you betray someone you love and it gives you great power.
I just repeat that just one more time, right? That last two sentences. And everyone who in the side chat, I want you to put a 1 in the side chat if this is resonating with so much of what we talk about. We're hearing a religious term, the Judas
The Judas ritual.
the Judas ritual. And for a lot of us, that's probably the first time we've heard that terminology, but we have understood the offering of a loved one and betrayal in these dark circles as the offering and the next stage, the leveling up, if you will. And just repeat that last two sentences because it resonates.
So she said, I didn't hate my mother. I wanted her power. So I did a Judas ritual with Anton LaVey's nephew, which was her boyfriend at the time. But and when I asked what that was, she said that's when you betray somebody that you love, and in the act of betrayal, it garnishes great power in the dark realm. So that's a huge sacrifice in the dark realm. So she said, I did a Judas ritual. She said, the problem is I was supposed to kill her. She said, we beat her. We thought we beat her to death with a baseball bat. We threw her in a river, but unfortunately she lived. And that's why I'm in juvenile hall. And I thought, well, that is so intense. So anyway, I thought, well,
one way of putting it. That's one way of putting it, Pat. That's intense. That's intense. Okay, all right. Summarizing it well.
So anyway, I said, that's why you're in this cage? Because I'd been into juvenile hall and there were murders and attempted murders in regular population. I said, that's why you're in this cage? And she said, no, that's another problem. And I said, well, what's that? And there were cameras, one behind me and one behind her that were filming everything that went on. And when I asked her about why she was in the cage, she got down real low so that the back of my head would block the video. She got up real close and she said, I need blood. And again, I was raised on a ranch in Idaho, man, just good old boys, cowboys.
At this point, Pastor Dave's like, I could be painting over graffiti right now, right? I could be painting over graffiti. Nice day. You know what I'm saying? Get nice coffee.
Exactly.
How we ended up here? This is because I just came to YouTube to make camping videos, Pastor Dave. Fast forward 7 or 8 years, and we're shutting down cartels, transport kids about the place. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah. So I know what you're saying, bro. So anyway, so she said, I need blood. And I honestly thought, oh, she thought I said I was a doctor. And so I said, well, I said I was a pastor, not a doctor. And she said, yeah, and I'm not addicted. Excuse me. She said, I'm not anemic. And so that was confusing to me. And I said, well, I'm not sure what your need is, but do you want me to ask for a doctor or a nurse? And she said, I'm not anemic, stupid. I'm addicted. And now she had her head down on the table so nobody could see her. And I still didn't get it. And so I said, addicted to drugs. And she said, that too. And I said, well, what do you mean you need blood? She said, I'm addicted to blood. I'm a vampire. And when she said that, you'd have to be there, 15 inches from her. But man, and I don't scare easy, bro. You know, I'm just
I
a
hear
rough
you.
and tumble guy. I don't scare you. But when she said I'm addicted to blood, there was something so sinister about it just took me back, and I knocked on the plexiglass. I said, "I'm done here."
Okay, I'm out.
They,
Thank you. Thank you very
yeah,
much. Yeah, 100%. I hear
they
you.
pulled me out. They were laughing, and they said, "So you didn't want to give blood today, huh?" And I said, "Is that why she's in the cage?" They said, "Yeah, she attacks people. She's a vampire." And I didn't even know that was a real thing, bro. I honestly, I just thought that was probably a Hollywood thing,
Well,
like Frankenstein, right?
but
It's
here's
just
the thing, right? It's because it's easy to believe in the positive, spiritual, supernatural, whatever we're going to, whatever you in the side chat want to title it. You know, it's easy to be like, oh, Jesus or whoever,
yeah,
brilliant, positive. And then when you're confronted, I often say this, good and bad is what creates balance. It's all around us. It's what existence is. It's why the wolf eats the deer. It's good for the wolf, terrible for the deer. Good and bad harmony. Evil, okay, is when we are confronted by it. It's like when our hand is above a flame. You can try and keep your hand there, but your brain's going to pull it away eventually.
yeah,
And our mind does that because most people cannot confront the true evil manifest. Most people can't handle bad stuff, let alone true
yeah,
evil.
yeah,
And when you have a little 14-year-old girl in a specially made box because
yeah,
grown men, right,
yeah,
cannot handle her. That's
yeah,
like the one in every 1,000 episodes of Cops where a guy
yeah.
comes running out a motel and he takes 9 tasers to the chest and
Right,
pushes it off. Do you know what I'm
right.
saying? Like there's only
I
so
know
much
exactly
taser,
what you're talking about.
there's only so much meth can block out. Like 9 tasers is a lot. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So
that's right.
when you see the manifestation of demonic evil,
Yep,
whatever you want to call it,
yeah,
side chat, it
absolutely,
will leave a lasting impression.
and supernatural power.
Of course. Of
And
course.
so anyway, they got me out of the cage, and then they were all laughing. And I said, I can't believe you guys just locked me in a cage with a vampire. They said, you wanted to talk to her. And anyway, they said, we'll let you into population now. You know, it's juvenile. All you have to sign in. I said, nah, I'm taking the rest of the day off.
Yeah. Hell yeah, I am.
So,
Listen,
so
promise me this, Pastor Dave. If they
yeah,
ever invent time traveling, promise me you'll go back, meet your 15-year-old self, and say, listen, at some point, you're going to say the words, did you really lock me in this cage with a vampire? And then just leave, right? Leave and confuse your younger self to wonder
yeah,
what the hell is going on.
yeah, right, right.
Because I get it. And if we were talking about an encounter that isn't documented, people,
Yeah,
again, passively write it off. But remember,
right.
we're talking about an institution with a little self-made institution for a 14-year-old girl who
Yeah,
is a self-proclaimed vampire. And
right,
that's the
right.
realness right there. That is the
Yeah,
realness.
yeah. So I was shocked. So I went home. If you met my wife, she's a truly wonderful person. She oozes love and compassion and helps everybody that she runs across. But anyway, I went home. She said, What are you doing home? I thought you were a juvenile hall." I told her what happened. And she said, "Oh, poor thing." I thought I was getting compassion from my wife, you know.
Right.
I said, "Well, I'm gonna be okay." She said, "I wasn't talking about you. I was talking about that little girl." And I
Right.
said, "The vampire?" She said, "Yeah." She said, "Can you imagine what a horrible life she must have lived to be addicted to human blood when she's 14 years old?" And
That's because that's your brain interpreting evil for the first time. And it's
yeah,
exactly what we just said there. Your brain pulled your hand off the flame. It
yeah,
wasn't until your wife came and put it into context
yep,
that you were then given another opportunity to evaluate how you would interpret that evil. Fascinating
exactly,
journey, bro. Fascinating
exactly.
journey. Keep going.
Well, so anyway, that plays into to the rest of the story. So I told you there was a young man that came out of juvenile hall that he had a Baphomet on his chest. He said, I'm part of the West Coast Unholy Trinity and born into Luciferian Satanism. And Lou Benninger, the guy that I told you stole the $3 million and then came to the church.
Yep.
He had led him to Christ in juvenile hall. He'd prayed to receive Christ, to yield his life to Christ. And then he had a spirit that choked him out, left him unconscious over and over again. Every time he came to, the spirit would say, denounce Christ or I'll have to kill you. I own you. Denounce Christ or I'll have to kill you. So anyway, through a process, a continued process of that, the authorities of juvenile hall let him out just because they didn't know what to do with him. They didn't want to believe his story about why he was continually found unconscious, but it scared them, and they just tapped out. They thought, this is out of our league. They had a doctor check him. There was nothing physically wrong, like low blood pressure, nothing like that.
Yeah.
So they just let him walk. He was just a juvenile, but he was already living by himself on his own. And he came to the church and told me his story. Anyway, the sad end of that story is that he was found dead. I don't want to go into all the details, but he had told me how he would die if I wasn't able to help him, and that's how he died.
Wow.
And so it was very sad to me. And again, more important than anything else in my life is those 4 words: love God, love others. And so I just thought, wow, I somehow failed that boy. I wish that I would have been in a position that I could have helped him. He told me the first time I talked to him, he said, do you have power over Lucifer himself? And I said, I'll never forget it. I was just a young pastor. I said, well, technically, yes. And he said, my friend, technically is not going to keep me alive. And again, I was a neophyte. I had no idea what was going on. I had no idea about occult powers and power spirits. And I just, I still to this day, I just wish that I could have helped that boy. But we had some of those experiences. And then I was still, the church was 1,500 people. It was doing really well. I was getting invitations to come and speak about how to impact your city through servant evangelism, is what we called it. And that's evangel means the good news. But my point was, the good news is that not only does God love you, but as sons and daughters of God, we love you enough to help you with your problems. That's servant evangelism. So anyway, I had done 10 different conferences around the United States on that. And I was feeling good about that, but I was being haunted by, the girl in the cage and by the boy who was found dead, chained to a tree, and different things that just left me thinking, God, we please help us. I want to be able to help these people. And at this point, there's people I can help, the orphan, the widow. There's people that just it's beyond my pay grade. It's just like, I'm sorry, I don't do that. And so I was going through that as just internal conflict. And during that time, there was a Christian missionary guy from Borneo, which is now called New Guinea. And I remember as a boy, he used to come to church and he'd tell stories about casting demons out of people. Of course, that's in the Bible. Jesus did that. His disciples did that. It's actually on the short list of things that true Christians should do. By the way, Ron, think about this. there's a short list of things that Jesus said his followers should do. I'm going to go through the list, and you tell me how many of those things are obvious in the great American religious enterprise, right?
All right, let's go. Hit me.
So here's the short list. Go everywhere sharing the good news that the kingdom of God has been established in the earth. Okay, that's the top of the list, right? So it's not just the authority of evil, but there is the authority of God's available as the solution to evil, right? So go everywhere and share the gospel of the kingdom. Let me just stop and say it was never about the church. Jesus mentioned the church as a vehicle to establish the kingdom of God. But we have a saying around here. It's not about the castle. It's about the kingdom. And what I mean by that is, did you know the average church in America and probably in the UK spends all its money fixing up its building?
Allegedly. Okay. I'm sure someone's fixing some books here, but let's go with that, Pastor Dave. Let's go with that.
Yeah. I mean, okay. Point well taken, Ron. But the point is, they never seem to have a dime left over to help anybody that's truly needy.
Yeah, but they need jets, Pastor Dave. How are they going to represent God properly if they don't have a Rolls Royce and a private jet, okay, and like at least 4 ounces of gold, right? Yeah. All about here. Okay. You know what I'm saying?
And so that's the great American religious enterprise. It's a religious business that has nothing to do with Christ of the Gospels.
I agree.
And so anyway, this whole
can I ask you a question? Yeah. Have you ever wondered why we are led down a path that has led to the witnessing of trauma that you would never have encountered if you were not nudged onto a certain path? We often witness things that we can't understand why we've seen. Why have we been seeing this 14-year-old girl, this poor man? Sometimes there's inevitability in the world where your interactions will have no impact and the outcome will remain the same. And I believe higher powers show us the result of evil, what happens when it's allowed to win. Because certain people who witness the outcome, not just witness the scariness of, the 14-year-old girl or the young man. That is what is needed for us to accept the journey in battling evil. And I often, because it haunts people are left with this haunting, what if I had done this?
Yeah.
Sometimes there is no what if. And what you've been led to see is inevitable. And by allowing you to see it, the inevitable tragedy turns into saving the next one and the next one and the next.
Yeah, I hear you, Ron, and I agree completely. I learned a long time ago, I needed to say often, there is an almighty God and it ain't you. So do your best and then be at peace with that. Because, things happen and you wish you could have done better. I think that will always be the case. But I've learned that what I need to do in those situations is learn what I can, gain what I can, and sleep well at night, knowing that it may not have turned out the way I had hoped, but I honestly did my best.
It can almost be broken down as spiritual exposure therapy. Okay. Because you become ready for what could be next. And without that, I genuinely believe without seeing the outcome of evil, it's hard for people to truly understand the fight ahead, if that makes sense. So you've had these moments, Pastor Dave, you've had this reawakening of like, okay, there's the other side of the coin. Okay. Right. What happened next on your journey?
Well, then this guy from Borneo shows up and he says, David, you remember me? My name's Jack Sisler. And I said, oh, you're the guy that used to have all kind of stories of wild stuff happening in the jungle. And he said, yeah. He said, I was a friend to your father. And He said, I hear from God. I'm a prophet. And I said, oh, okay. And just between us girls, I've met a lot of unprofitable prophets that I don't know who they're hearing from, but it's evidently not God. But anyway, that doesn't discount the fact that some people do hear from God. So I didn't really know him. And I said, okay. And you're calling me because? He said, well, I was minding my own business. He said, I was fasting and waiting on God. And he told me to buy you a book and to write in it and to come and bring it to you. So I'll see you this weekend.
Okay.
And I said, what? He said, I'll see you this weekend. And I just thought, wow, what, that's wild. I mean, it's only happened to me once in my life.
Uh-huh.
So this old guy, Jack Sisler, by the way, there's a Christian missionary classic book written about his life that's called Jack Sisler, Man After God's Own Heart. He was quite a legendary guy, but
Wow.
I didn't really know all that at the time.
Right.
And I just got this phone call, right? So I'm a young guy, and it's right in the middle of, me doing these seminars on servant evangelism. And so he comes to the church and he says, he shows me this book, and on the cover of it, it has a Druid priest in chains in a black robe, kneeling on a pentagram over flames with evil spirits underneath in the flames.
Looks like a fun read right off the bat. You're like, oh, great. Yeah, I'm going to get myself a hot cup of cocoa, run a bath, and really, really settle into this one,
Oh, come on, man. And a big sword was coming down from heaven and cutting the chain. And he said, this is the book God wants you to read. And I said, Jack, I don't really read books like that. And he said, well, you need to read this one. Yeah. And I said, I'll never forget this, Ron. I said, Jack, that looks a little weird for me. And he grabbed me by both shoulders and looked me right in the eye, bony old guy. He says, David, he says, the world is much weirder than you have ever imagined.
Dude, can you imagine this? Can you imagine Pastor Dave's life as a Netflix series, right? And these moments playing out, because I'm seeing it in my brain. And I'm just imagining your brain going, what the hell is happening?
Exactly.
Right? Like, what is going on?
Exactly.
But how defining is it though now? Now that you're here, looking back at all of those encounters, there is nothing short of spiritual guidance and preordained path.
It's totally miraculous.
Mind blown. Anyway, it's right. It's shaking you. The world is weirder. Carry on.
Yeah. And so he said, I want you to open the book and read what I wrote in it. I don't have it here, but I can quote it because I've quoted it many times. It says, Dear Dave and Cheryl, our dear friends who we love, which was interesting because it was the first time as an adult that I'd ever met the guy. I'd just seen him, as a little boy. Yeah. And I thought, our dear friends who we love, he was thinking about some relationship in the future, obviously, because it wasn't in the past. But anyway, he said, Dear Dave and Cheryl, our dear friends who we love, may this true story help you take your right place in the front lines of spiritual warfare. Love, Jack and Ann Sisler. Yeah. And I read that, and I didn't know what else to say. So I said, thank you. And he says, thank you. I said, yeah, it's it's a term of appreciation.
Yeah, don't thank me, mate. Listen, I know where he's going with this.
That's exactly where he was going, Ron.
Yeah.
He said, you probably shouldn't thank me yet. He said, you understand the concept of spiritual warfare? And I didn't really. And I said, well, the good guys fight the bad guys, right?
Preordained paths, right? And people, when you meet them like that, right? It's mind-blowingly confusing until you start looking back. And it's almost like those moments are the validation that's needed in the questioning that comes later on, right?
Right on, Ron.
Right?
Exactly what
Pastor
happened.
Dave, my guy.
Exactly
Right,
what
carry on.
happened.
Yes.
And so he asked me to read it. Well, he prayed over me. He left. He's always doing missions in Borneo or Vanuatu or someplace. And I kind of forgot about him running a big church. And I opened it and looked at it, and I thought, I'm not going to read this. It is grisly. It's about rituals of defilement, and the purpose is to defile a human being so completely that she might qualify to be the bride of Satan and actually get pregnant in a sex ritual with Lucifer. And uh, that's the whole legend of, or the teaching of the Antichrist, the son of Satan, blah, blah, blah. So anyway, I didn't know about all that stuff, but the rituals were so gross that I just thought, I'm not reading this. Nobody needs that kind of garbage in their mind. And so, I put it away. 2 years later, Jack Sisler called me. Did you read the book? No. Same thing. He said, David, read the book. I know thousands and thousands of pastors, but God told me to bring that book to you. Whatever. I took it down off the shelf. I looked at it. Same thing. I thought, this is defiling. There's no reason for me to read it. Put it back. That happened 4 times, bro, and 2 years apart. So 8 years later, he calls me from Chile, and he says, David, this is Jack Sisler. I'm not going to ask you about the book because I know you haven't read it. Because he says, because you're stubborn and rebellious. And I just thought, that's the last thing I need is a bony old prophet giving me a hard time. Because, as the great American religious enterprise goes, I was doing pretty good, Right. So anyway, he said, I'm gonna be there this weekend. And I didn't want him to come, Ron, because he always chided me and, you need to read this. You need to do this. He
is only there. He is only in your life till you read that damn book. Okay?
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Okay? You looking back now, you're like, oh, okay, I could be 4 years ahead of where I am right now. I get it now. Okay. Right. Sometimes prophets, if you're a bony looking crazy dude, maybe tone it back. All right. Maybe come a little softer. Okay. And we'll get a speedier response. I get it, man. I've had my own exact moment. So continue.
But honestly, I understood why he said, you might not want to thank me right now because you have no idea what it means for me to be your spiritual father. But I was getting that, So he calls from Chile. He says, I'm going to see you this weekend. I tried to talk him out of coming. He says, David, I don't take my orders from you. I take them from God. I'll see you this weekend. It's like, oh, brother. So anyway, he came that weekend. We had dinner at our house, and that old man grabbed me by the short hairs and yanked me all around my backyard. And he said, you're rebellious. I said, Jack, I'm not rebellious. He said, yes, you are. He said, I'm a prophet of God. You could have found that out. Your dad viewed me as a prophet. He said, the reason you're not obeying is not because you don't think I'm a prophet. It's because you don't want to do what God told you to do. That's the reason you're disobeying. And, he just like, he roughed me up pretty good. He even told me, he said, hey, if you're not going to be obedient to the Spirit of the Almighty God, resign your place as a pastor and just do something else.
Free will only applies to those who aren't pre-chosen for a task. Okay.
Oh boy.
And once you realize that and you're like, oh, okay, so I guess, I'm on a mission. It's the way it goes.
That's what he said. And I said this, Ron. I said, Ron, I said to Jack, I said, Jack, I've looked at this book for 8 years. It's gross. It's defiling. I don't want it in my mind. And I can't imagine why God would want me to read it. And he said, well, David, I'm not God, so I can't tell you that. I can tell you that I know thousands and thousands of people, and only you did God tell me to buy that book, write that message in it, and bring it to you. And I said, Jack, why would God choose me? You know what he said, Ron? He said, I have no idea. I never would have chosen you.
But here's
Because
the thing.
I was so reluctant,
You were chosen many lifetimes ago. The spirit that encaptures you now has been doing this in every lifetime. You know,
Yeah.
that's the one thing that I can honestly say about the higher powers. They don't want to spread around the taking away of your free will. There are individuals who have been put here on paths for millennia to do these missions and this work.
Well, yeah.
And no one wants to be the messenger of turning up at the house and delivering it. I'll tell you that too. So
I will say this, I know the whole thing with repeated lifetime. I know Jesus, when they asked who John the Baptist was, he said, this is Elijah, if you're able to receive it. I know all that stuff. For me, all I have knowledge of is these last 67 years, So anyway, whatever happened in the past, it was obvious that that Jack felt like I was on a path ordained by the Almighty, and it was his job to teach me the ropes. That old man felt that way. And so he said, David, you're about to be face to face with the devil and you're not ready for it. And I said, well, I don't want to be ready for it, Jack. I don't want to.
Okay, I don't want to. All right,
I don't want to do that.
I want to. Yeah,
I said, what's wrong with helping orphans and widows and helping ladies get their cars fixed? What's wrong with that? And he said, there's nothing wrong with that, David. But what you don't understand is God created you and put you here for a specific purpose. He's asking me to try to help get you there, and you're dragging your feet. And so he said, I got news for you. Are you familiar, Ron, with the book of Jonah in the Bible about the prophet not wanting to go to Nineveh? And
not really. I've heard of the book, but it's not my forte.
Anyway, it's about this guy named Jonah. God told him, go preach to Nineveh, that they could repent of their sins and turn to God. But he didn't like the Ninevites because they were Assyrians who had oppressed the Jewish nation. So he said, I'm not going to do it. So he got on a boat to go to a place called Tarshish, and the great storm came up, and they said, there's somebody on here that is in direct violation of the will of God, and we think it's you, Jonah. He said it is. So they said, well, to save our lives, we're going to throw you into the ocean. And so they threw him overboard. The Bible says a great fish swallowed him and swam to Nineveh and vomited him out on the beach.
Dude, I'm not being funny. Until I read that story about the diver that got swallowed up by the blue whale, right? I can totally see it happening, man. All I'm saying is 1 in a million chance.
1 in a million, but it happens, man.
It's happened. Okay.
So when I said, is there any way out of this, Jack? I don't want to do this. And he said, go read the book of Jonah. Well, I knew the book of Jonah. And the theme is, if God wants you to do something, you're going to do it the hard way or the easy way, but you're going to do it. Right? So anyway, I said, I get the book of Jonah. So what should I do? And he said, well, you should fast and pray. Fasting gives you greater spiritual sensitivities, and it's actually a really profound weapon in spiritual warfare. But he said, fast and pray for the next week. Ask God to forgive you for being rebellious, and read that book. Well, to the day, Ron, 7 days later, we're at church. I had fasted the whole week.
Yeah, I'm with you.
And And I had never, I mean, we were just do-gooders. We were helping people, right? But when that old prophet said we were going to be face to face with the devil, bam, shakalaka, it was on. And so this gal came into our church, and we've helped lots of homeless people, right? And I could tell she was a homeless person. She had a big brace on her face, that screwed her jaw together. And I thought she's been in a nearly fatal accident or something. She's looking rough.
Yeah.
And so she comes in, she sits in the back. I saw her back there. I asked people, I invited them to have a relationship with the Spirit of God through faith in Christ. She came forward. I prayed for her, but she wouldn't close her eyes. I could tell she was really nervous. And so after the meeting, I gave her a card, and I said, "Hey, if you ever need anything, give us a call. Nobody needs to live life alone. We need to help each other. So you have a family now, so we'll help you." So anyway, next day, she called, and she's whispering. She said, you need to come help me. And I said, well, could you speak up a little bit? I could hardly hear you. She said, no, I can't. I said, why not? She said, I'm hiding the bushes in front of the courthouse, and witches are trying to kill me. I said, what? She said, can we talk about this later? My life is at risk. Please come to the courthouse. So my wife and I jumped in the car and went over there. And, at that point, I didn't know nothing about covens or witches or satanic ritual abuse. I just was a neophyte, right? I was just a good old boy, cowboy. So I went over there, and I told Cheryl on the way over, because we'd helped lots of homeless people, and we still do. We give over 3 million pounds of food away a year.
Wow.
And so, yeah, every night of the week we're giving food away and clothing and stuff. So anyway, so I said, it's that lady that was all beat up, and she probably just needs some groceries or something. But anyway, if you work very much with homeless people, they all have a story. Most of them are not true. And I don't really care, because however they got there, they're screwed up and they need help.
Yeah.
Right. So the only reason they make up stories is they don't think you'll help them if they don't make up some sensational story.
Right.
So Cheryl and I, we don't care about that. Like, it doesn't matter what your story is. If you're hungry, we'll help you. So we went over there, and sure enough, she came running out of the bushes, jumped in the car, laid down in the back seat, and said, drive before they see you. And anyway, so of course, one thing led to another. We said, where should we take you? She didn't have a place to go. So we wound up we had a big 2-story Victorian house, and we had a spare bedroom. We always had people in our house. Usually quite a few people. But anyway, at that point, we didn't have anybody. And Cheryl said, well, our guest room's open. You can stay with us. So we moved her into our house. And bro,
I'm getting this doesn't end well vibes, Dave. I'm not going to lie to you. I feel like this is the moment where you hear a noise in the kitchen and come down, and she's floating in the middle of the kitchen with hellfire all around her. Wait, hang on. I've got the voice here, actually, Dave. And she's like, you will not defeat me, humans. I will rule this earth.
You're killing me, dude.
I'm just saying, man, that's where my brain's going. So,
okay,
welcomed her into the home. And
right.
What happens?
So anyway, I did, at that point, I had never even heard of the witching hour. I mean, I was from Emmett, Idaho. The whole town had 3,000 people, and we were all cowboys, right? Nobody did weird things in Emmett, Idaho. And so I didn't know the first thing about any of this stuff. And at 2:00, bam, straight up, all hell broke loose, and blood-curdling scream, and she came rolling down the stairs. There's a half flight of stairs, and then a landing, and then another half flight of stairs. She came rolling down, screaming, rolled up against that on that half deck, and of course, the whole house was awake, and it was blood curdling. And we're trying to turn the lights on. We heard her rolling down the next flight of stairs. She rolled right up against our bedroom door, screaming, and she was saying, "Leave me alone, Knack. Leave me alone, Knack. You can't have me, Knack." And so anyway, we got the lights on. I got my Levi's pulled on, opened the door, and she was fighting something that was unseen. But it was really obvious that it was clawing at her, and she was kicking and screaming, and so we didn't know what to do, Ron. So we just like began to call out to the Almighty for help, and we began to pray, God have mercy on her, Jesus help us. And suddenly it was over, and she's exhausted, and she's leaning up against the wall, and she says kind of casually, "Thank you." And I said, "Thank you." I said, "You're welcome." But I said, "Well, I need to know what just happened."
You're moving to the barn. That's what's happening. You're staying in the barn tomorrow night, young lady. Okay. That's what's happening. All right.
Yeah. Hold on just a second. Can you just handle the next appointment? Okay. So, yeah.
Pastor Dave, if we need to do a part two, because we've ran over, I'm more than happy. We can get it set up for this week if you need to go and do your thing 100%, but because we are gripped. Okay. I'm telling you now, man. Okay. Because when we come back, we'll start off at the point where night one,
she rolled down the stairs.
Rolling down the stairs. I think that's a cliffhanger. That's quite a good little cliffhanger.
Yeah. We call that the knack attack, Ron. That's the knack attack. But anyway, if you don't mind, that would help me out because I've got some things backed up around here.
Before we go, right? Isn't it really interesting that there is one particular deity that when he's called upon, it deals with 99% of these demonic situations?
Yep.
And
absolutely,
it's fascinating when you look into this. And listen, we will listen. Side chat next time though. We'll start straight off where we left off. I've liked to take the time to get to know Pastor Dave. I think if we'd went straight in with the stories, the finer nuances of the journey, the realization, the prophets, the destiny, all of that wouldn't be as profound when we get to the end of the story.
So. It is truly profound, my friend.
Right? And the beauty of it is, it would be so less interesting if you were one of these organized religious people that was like, because if you were, you'd be like, I was the chosen. He came down from above. That's how, but dude, that's how it would be getting done.
You're killing me, Ron.
Like, honestly, I feel like you and me need to go to like Comic-Con and do a Big Lebowski cosplay together and just like live our best lives, brother. So look, I'll get Shane to set up part two for this week. We can see where you are midweek or during the week and things like this. And we'll continue this story because
my friend.
Thank you so much, Dave. And if you wouldn't mind, on the next show, if we could invite some callers on to ask you some questions, because a lot of your followers have been in the side chat, and I think they would enjoy that. So
listen, Ron, my IT guy's asking if we can get the recording of this session. It was a lot of fun.
Yeah, of course. If just I'll give a link to Shane. I'll get it to the IT guy. He clicks it. It downloads. Perfect. We're all good. Pastor Dave, it has been a goddamn pleasure. I'll tell you that.
Great to meet you, my friend. Yeah, I'll look forward to meeting you in person someday.
Hell yeah. All right, brother. You have a fantastic evening. Thank you to everyone in the side chat, and thank you to everyone for your support. I cannot wait for part two. So listen, thank you to everyone. Take care. Like and subscribe. We'll see you in the next.
Grace and blessings to you. All right. Bye-bye.